Howdy everyone, and welcome to the cerealgeekTV YouTube channel. My name is James Eatock, and today I present to you something special. Last year I featured a lengthy 6-part interview with storyboard artist and writer Robert Lamb. I've known Rob since 1998 and he's always spoken very highly of the Filmation storyboard department, especially Vic Dal Chele, who was also the best man at Rob's wedding. Vic Dal Chele has worked in the animation industry from 1981 until, well, today. He's worked at Filmation, Marvel Productions, Geek, Hanna-Barbera, Warner Brothers, Disney, the list goes on. I've known Vic for over a decade now and he's an incredibly humble gentleman. I thought it would be fascinating for fans of this channel and animation in general to hear Vic talk about his time in the industry. This is the 4th part of the interview. Enjoy!
I knew I was struggling a lot with the details from so long ago about what shows I did. And I thought I'd dredged up the episodes in order, but it seems that I missed something, and kind of something important. It turns out that in season 1 of He-Man, before I went to Marvel and DIC, I actually boarded another episode that I had totally forgotten. James, you contacted me after you found the storyboard for the episode entitled Return of Evil, which you randomly found on eBay. And looking at the scans displayed on the eBay listing, it became apparent I boarded it. And to refresh my memory, I pulled out this old volume here and looked it up, and it's in there. I also just watched the episode, and parts of it were somewhat familiar to me, but I have to say, first, the episode story isn't the best. Seeing it again, I was sort of happy to see some of the innovations I did to use stock and same as that made for a solid composition. So yeah, it's an amazing thing to know that I actually did one more than I thought I had. But do me a favor, don't go out of your way to watch it. Well, let's see, what was it like working on the first Transformers miniseries? It was really a cool idea. I mean, it was like stuff we really had never seen before, because a lot of us were into anime, early anime, I guess, from the 70s and 80s. We would go down to Little Tokyo, which is really close to downtown Los Angeles, and it had bookstores and toy stores and stuff, and we would see some of the first Transformers toys, and we got them because we thought they were so cool. I mean, I remember I had the one, I guess it turned into one of the Decepticons. I'm not sure which one now, but it was a robot that turned into a sort of like a futuristic handgun. I remember I had that one. Where it is today, I have no idea, but still, I mean, we just were really thought it was a cool idea. Well, the Transformers was an animated show that was done by Marvel, but for the toy company that was importing the toys and making new ones for the US market. And that was, I think, called Hasbro. It's funny that, you know, He-Man was, some people say, a toy commercial, but it wasn't, because Lude wouldn't change the show to a toy commercial where every episode had 27 characters in it. But Marvel, because I think the majority of their budgets were being taken care of by the toy company contribution, they wanted, or were obliged to have, a majority of the characters in every show. I remember there was like, you can't get all these characters into one shot. And anyway, that was one of the difficulties of the show. And also, there was the freedom on one hand that we didn't have a stock and same as system. And anything that we thought of that worked cinematically, we could do. We weren't limited by some of the constraints that some of the other studios had, which was basically not a stock and same as system that you would pull from to use on every episode, but you had to set up your shots in each episode that you worked on to use materials over. And sometimes it was, dialogue setups, close-ups, people speaking, those shots you could say, okay, I'm going to use that again when he's talking here, and then when he's talking here, or he or she, or Scooby-Doo, or whoever. We could reuse these shots and either exactly or add an expression or acting to it. But still, it would be that same layout, that same character. Then if there was specific new characters that had an action like a run or a walk, you tried to reuse that same one, and that would help lower their costs of animating the episode. So that's how you thought of with Hanna-Barbera, Ruby Spears, and the other studios in town. But that first year or two of Marvel, they had this contract with their Japanese studio that whatever they sent them, they had to animate and give them back. So there was, we had total freedom. And that total freedom was needed for shows like Transformers and G.I. Joe, especially because there were so many characters that had to be shown in each episode to make the toy company happy. Now, working at Marvel at the time, like I said, the original DePatie Freeling building had caught fire. They were in temporary offices while their new building was being constructed down Sepulveda Boulevard. So yeah, we were in that building, and like G.I. Joe was, I think, in a building across the courtyard, and we were in another building. There was like 4 or 5 buildings in this little complex. So we would see Stan, going to lunch and things like that. That was a thrill for us, because he was such a hero to so many of us. And but we were working, like I said, mostly with Hanna-Barbera, Ruby Spears veterans, and we're just really kind of learning still. I'm still kind of early in my career, very early in my career, so I had a lot to learn. We were working with the people I remember. There was like Greg Davidson, who actually became the model for Spike, the kid that interacts with the Autobots. And but then the character designer Floro Derry was he's a great artist, and unbeknownst to us, he put us into the model pack. Now, he made Greg the co-star of the show, but the rest of us guys became incidentals. And James, a few years back, pointed out to me that because Floro had made me me and Dave Russell, 2 utility repairmen who go out to this substation that was attacked by the Decepticons, that he and I are the first people of Earth to encounter the robots. And I guess, that is some kind of claim to fame. But anyway, I'll take it. It was a lot of fun. These guys, we were all inspired by the material, and we tried to do, an exciting episodes. But we had 3 episodes to do. It was a mini series, meaning that that's all we were doing, and it was going to be featured in syndication, like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, or Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, just to see if kids would tune in. And if kids would tune in, then they would order up an entire series. In fact, that's how G.I. Joe was launched. And of course, kids were tuning in, and it got to a series as well. Now, the director of the series was a Korean fellow by the name of Nelson Shin. And Nelson was working at Marvel, and unbeknownst to me, I didn't know this detail until like 10 years ago. It was his first directing assignment. And Nelson had a very, very thick Korean accent. And often it was very difficult to understand what he was trying to communicate. What I didn't know was that the people had said that they would give him a chance to direct on this, but if people have trouble understanding him, they take him off of it and put somebody else in charge. So we're working away on the miniseries, and I know I did the first 1 or 2, or maybe 1 and 3. Anyway, and at some point, he was giving me instructions that I wasn't understanding. I mean, I couldn't make out, maybe 50% of the words he was saying. And he got frustrated, and he said, "Do you have trouble understanding me?" However he said it. And I said, to be honest, stupid me, to be honest, yes. And he fired me. So then I went on to G.I. Joe. So after working on the second miniseries, we were moved over to work on the first series of G.I. Joe. But I didn't stay much longer at Marvel. I ran into some problems. The problem being that one of the first scripts, it was split up between four board artists, I believe. We each got an equal amount of script pages within half a page. And we started storyboarding our sequences or our pages. And after a couple of days, they said they're rewriting my section. So when the rewrites came, my 4 pages became 7. And then after a day, they said they're rewriting my section, and 7 pages became like 10. And about that time, the other guys were getting close to have worked out their 4 pages of script, at least in very rough form. And I said, well, what's my deadline? And they said it's the same. And I thought, well, that's unfair. Everybody else is doing 4 pages and now I've got like 10, and you still want me to get it done in the same time. But you've delayed me a couple of ways by saying, hold on, we're rewriting your section. And one of the guys in production came to me and said, there's this new studio starting up called DIC. And he's going over there, and he'd like me to go over there with him. So I thought, well, something's kind of strange about something going on here. So let me go over to DIC. And it turned out in the long run to be a very good idea. So I left Marvel. I went to DIC. They had just started business. And at that time, they were a French company with American partners. And they had opened up a little storefront on Ventura Boulevard in Studio City across from one of the television studios. And set up shop there. They had gotten quite the order for a fledgling studio. They had sold 5 series in their first go-out. They also had syndicated shows they were producing, like Inspector Gadget. But it was an unprecedented order for a fledgling studio to have 5 network shows. It really was an amazing feat. There were The Littles, The Get Along Gang, Pole Position, Hulk Hogan's Rock and Wrestling, and Kid Video, which is what I worked on. Now this is, in the early 80s, where MTV was just coming to the fore with music videos. And so they thought, let's do a Saturday morning show with live action and animated live action characters and their animated counterparts. And they would be a band that would do music videos. So I was put on that as one of the board people. Worked with Kevin Altieri. That's where I met Kevin. He went on to do Batman and all sorts of wonderful shows in his career. There was a guy named Eddie Fitzgerald, who was quite the funny guy. I mean, a funny board guy. He was also a riot, but he did really wacky stuff. The background guy, designer, was named Richard Reynes, and Richard went on to do quite a few things for DIC, and I worked with him a lot in the years to come. And he also sort of became the main producer of The Simpsons. And I think he still is to this day. I haven't seen a show in a little while to know if it's current or not, that he's still there, but I would imagine he is. But we did this show called Kid Video, and it was of the 5 shows that Deke did that season, it's the only one that got renewed. And I think it's probably because of MTV. We'll take a win when we can have it. And so that's what kept the studio going. The first year, Deke was in a building in Studio City on Ventura Boulevard. It was housed in an old storefront building of maybe 5 stores. But Deke had the entire building for themselves, but it was barely organized. They were trying to make do with the space that they had. I was given a drawing table and put in what would be a display window for the store that used to be in the building. I sat there almost on display, luckily with other people, not just myself. I mean, the whole studio was just a crowded bullpen. It was full of noisy young artists just starting off in their careers. And we were all crammed into this vintage Studio City old commercial property. I wish I could have found a picture of that old building at the time. It's still there, but it has had a tear down to the studs remodel. Actually, twice that's happened to the building in the years since. The only one thing I recall, across from the studio in Ventura, was an old studio that was built during the silent movie era, but was still in production. At the time, it was owned by CBS Fox. and 3 popular television shows were in production at the studio at that time. One was Hill Street Blues, St. Elsewhere, and one of my very favorites of that time, Remington Steele, starring Pierce Brosnan. One day I sat in my storefront window seat and watched an episode of Remington Steele being filmed right outside the window. I remember that Pierce Brosnan was driving a vintage Auburn car and skidding around to a stop in the middle of the boulevard. It was really kind of cool to watch and to see one of my favorite television stars in 3 dimensions. When we were done with Kid Video, everybody was getting laid off, and I thought, well, what do I do now? Where do I go? It's that time of year where all the studios have done all the pre-production work for their shows for Saturday morning, and that was the only real market at the time. So it was basically, if you were lucky, you got to work about 8 or 9 months out of the year, and then you had to sort of figure out a way to make it through to the next season beginning. It's sort of like being a school teacher in a way. You work 9 months and then you're off for 3. So anyway, I wasn't quite sure what to do, and my friend at the time, Mike Swanigan, I talked to him about it, and he said, well, come back to Filmation. And I said, well, what? Well, why? I mean, he's not going to let me back in. And he goes, no, you don't understand. You've worked at Marvel, and you've worked now at Geek, and that means that you're a person that the studios will hire. And so he'll want you back because you've proven that you're hireable by other studios. And I thought he was kind of nuts, but I thought, well, what the hell? What do I got to lose? So I applied, and to my surprise, I was hired back at Filmation at about 3/4 of the way through the 2nd season of He-Man.
To be continued.